This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 385 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend and brother, Liam. Liam, we are soldiering on here through the cold months as we move through some of the final episodes of Justice League Unlimited. And we are back here this week with a follow-up to a previous episode, one that ties a couple of stories together, actually. A lot of romance, a lot of past, and we actually go deep into the far ancient past, perhaps, as we discussed this week's episode of Justice League Unlimited.
That's right. We're getting very into the just as complicated as comic book origins can possibly get when it comes to the old Hawkman and Hawkgirl origins that we'll delve into with the DCAU versions of those complicated origins in the episode aptly titled Ancient History.
That's right, and it's not the only history we'll be talking about today, as we see it also may or may not refer to some past romantic feelings between a couple of our Justice Leaguers and a current love triangle, perhaps also. Or is it a love square? I'm not quite sure. But either way, we'll talk about that on this week's episode here in just a moment. But of course, before we do that, we will get the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, Ancient History, which originally aired here in the United States on the Cartoon Network nearly 20 years ago at the time of original recording here on April 29th, 2006. So before, of course, we get the official IMDb synopsis for this week, we will remind you that it is brought to you by buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review, the best way to support the podcast. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review today and become a supporter of the podcast. You can become a one-time supporter of the podcast. Perhaps if you like to share a thought, an encouraging note, or maybe even an opinion, you can become a one-time supporter of the podcast, or you can become a monthly supporter of the podcast at one of our 3 leveled tiers. All of the tiers have some really great perks with them, but of course, our top tier, Super Friend tier, comes with the perk to ask us a question, have your question answered on the air each and every week about the episode that we are reviewing that week. We do have a question that has been asked by one of our faithful supporters. In just a moment, we'll come back here in a little bit and discuss that question of the week. But if you'd like to join them and the other growing list of supporters, or you want to become a one-time supporter of the podcast, either way, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU Review. Check out those options to support us. And please, we ask you, consider supporting the podcast today.
That's right. So this synopsis is for Ancient History, which is written by Matt Wayne with teleplay by Jeff Johns, never heard of him, directed by Joaquin DeSantos, with music by Christopher Carter and Michael McCuistion, and animation by DR Movie Co. And that synopsis reads as such. Hawkman returns with Shadow Thief and discovers the true nature of his relationship with Hawkgirl. All right, I have some notes. He does not return with Shadow Thief. Hawkman returns and Shadow Thief. With Shadow Thief, the way that's structured makes it sound like they're hanging out, like they're buddies.
Clearly not.
Also, Shayera is not called Hawkgirl anymore. She makes a point of telling Vigilante not to call her that in JLU. Right. So she's just Shayera now.
She's just Shayera.
So,
that's right. F, there you go. See us after class, please, IMDb synopsis writer. You clearly are not paying attention in class. Leah, before we get into our breakdown of the plot for this, briefly, I guess we can just touch on this, as you alluded to at the beginning here. So historically, Hawkman, Hawkgirl / Hawkwoman, whatever you want to call her, Shayera, these characters have a bit of a complicated historical past with regards to what their origins are in the comics, right? You could probably spend an
Hmm.
entire 2, 3 episodes, maybe more, five, 6 episodes breaking down the origins individually if you really wanted to go into a lot of depth here. I remember, I think when we were growing up, the DCAU tie-in books and sort of related like Batman Superman magazine and the Adventures in the DCU and stuff
Hmm.
like that had them as like uh they were like detectives or something like that. That
Hmm.
were like,
Like
I don't know if they were
museum creators slash
yeah.
or curators, I should say,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
slash detectives or something.
Yeah, yeah, they were like they may have been alien, but they were kind of like space detectives, but they were based in like the central part of America. It was supposed to be like Detroit or something like that was where they were based, I think,
Hmm.
from what I remember. So
Midway City, which gets a shout in the episode here.
there you go. So midway, which may be more Chicago than Detroit, but whichever. They're in some sort of centralized city, not central city, but centralized city in the United States was their home base. And so for that was for me that was always their history. But then if you look back at some of the other layers here, and I think ultimately that's what we seem to think might have spawned John's involvement here. There was a bit of a movement around this time to try and retcon and figure out like one way to fit all of these complicated origins into one cohesive story. And that may or may not be. We're speculating here, or your speculation before we came on, and it's hard for me to disagree. That this might be why Mr. Johns ultimately gets a teleplay credit here for this, because we're kind of tying things together here with a bunch of their other past historical origin stories.
Hmm. Yeah, so yeah, to say the least, I think the Golden Age versions were in fact reincarnated Egyptians, and then the Silver Age, the post they from a different Earth came the space cop from the planet Thanagar, Hawkman and Hawkwoman, and then there were multiple Hawk girls and women at the same time with like bits and pieces of different origins. And I think Jeff Johns in his JSA run, his Justice Society run that he wrote for several volumes, he sort of decided to try to streamline that into one coherent thing to try to sort of make it all canon. Imagine Jeff Johns writing a comic to try to make sense of a convoluted history of retcons of DC comics over the years. What could
Never.
possibly go wrong? But
Right.
but yes, so he attempts to do that by sort of reintroducing the reincarnation element, but saying that each version of the Hawks has kind of existed, and then when they die, they're sort of reborn into new identities, whether that be the museum curators or aliens or I think the modern version is a younger woman named Kendra Saunders as far as Hawk Girl goes, which has been adapted to things like Arrow. So they've his attempt was basically to say, well, to take the reincarnation of the original event and then sort of use that as the excuse for why the origins keep changing, and it also sort of allows them to unceremoniously at times kill off and then resurrect Hawkman or Hawkgirl or Hawkwoman on any given comic book based on this sort of dying and reborn sort of star-crossed lovers across time idea that they've sort of gone with in the more modern era. And in fact, this episode that we're going to talk about here today, I think, does that. But as we'll get to when we talk about this, there's actually an extra little wrinkle that kind of adds in the DCAU flavor to this sort of idea, I guess, with the inclusion of another person, perhaps that was an ancient lover of Shaira's. But we'll get to that in a few moments.
That's right. Great job in keeping that all together there. We'll try and see if the listeners are paying attention with a quiz later on in the episode or something. I don't know. You can send us your feedback about what your favorite perhaps a origin story for the Hawk people are at DCAU Review on all of those social media apps. But yeah, let's get into the plot, shall we, Liam? We start things off with the Green Lantern chasing a familiar Hawkman foe, that being the Gentleman Ghost, who shows up here for one of his few appearances in the DCAU.
Mind the ion drive. That's delicate equipment.
Right. I took you lightly. I won't make that mistake again.
I think you might. If I were to give you another chance, I mean.
It's all yours, GL. The nth metal in this net
Has properties that interfere with dimensional shifting, I know.
Next time, Green Lantern, I'll do you proper.
Quiet down in there.
I fought our gentleman ghost before. These intangible types can be tricky,
Uh-huh.
but he didn't stand a chance against the two of us.
Look, Hawkman, I appreciate the help. Let's leave it at that.
Well, give Shaira my regards.
Also, maybe notable that we'll talk about in visuals, Green Lantern's using some constructs here, despite the fact that he puts a nice big old baseball mitt up there to try and catch him. We see that the Gentleman Ghost is actually impervious to any of these constructs. Green Lantern's ring is no good on him, just as it appears that the Gentleman Ghost is about to cut off our dear Green Lantern's head. Swooping in, literally, is Hawkman, who uses a nth metal reinforced net to capture our Gentleman Ghost. He reminds John, who is quick to remind him that he's aware of the power of nth metal, seeing as how Shaira's mace is also made of that same metal, that nth metal has a power over magic, and he's able to thank Hawkman, although a bit begrudgingly, before he departs, as they're able to take the Gentleman Ghost in. We then cut back to Shaira, who, by the way, the Hawkman mentions to Green Lantern to make sure that he gets a shout out to Shaira. And let's just say John's not too happy that he realizes that this guy that he may or may not believe to be a bit of a stalker continues to shout out kind of John's ex-girlfriend a little bit here. And as we are cutting back to the next scene, we do see that the aforementioned Shadow Thief makes a brief appearance. So we see that he himself has witnessed this entire interaction and is back from the dead, apparently. If you recall, he was nearly buried alive, or assumed to be buried alive, in the previous appearance. We cut back to the Metro Tower, where we see the aforementioned Shaira and Vixen are working out in one of the rooms. They're kind of discussing their budding rivalry over John's heart, and kind of out in the open. It's no longer a secret. Vixen is game for any competition here.
You might want to ease up a bit there. Most guys don't really go for the ripped, bulky look.
Just trying to maintain my girlish figure. My girlish figure. And why does it always have to be about the guys anyway?
Honey, it's always about the guys. And since I'll be away on that photo shoot for a week...
Here we go.
Well, I'm just surprised you haven't made your move before now.
Still trying to figure out the proper Earth protocol for this situation. It's not like I can just assassinate you in your sleep or poison your water. I miss Thanagar.
I'm just saying, you think you got a shot? Take it. I'm not worried.
Mari, look, this isn't...
There you are.
And wouldn't you know, just as they're continuing to have this witty repartee, John Stewart himself enters as Vixen is getting ready to leave. The two of them set up their next date right there in front of Shaira. And as Vixen leaves, John mentions that he actually needs to speak to Shaira herself before she leaves. And as Vixen is leaving, Shaira throws her a bottle of water, calling back to the line about potentially poisoning the water that she mentioned that she would do if they were on Thanagar. Vixen tosses the bottle away and walks out, shaking her head again, saying she's not really that scared, honest. And then we get a little bit of dialogue between John and Shire as he mentions that he saw her boyfriend slash stalker. Shire is quick to correct that he's not her boyfriend and really not interested in anything to do with Hawkman, but she's not really concerned by his return either.
And he's still talking about you.
Yeah, the whole reincarnated lovers from ancient Egypt bit. Carter's just a little confused.
He's an obsessed fanboy with wings and an axe.
If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were...
Concerned. The guy's a serious creep.
I'm a big girl, John. You know I can take care of myself.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up. This isn't about us, Shira.
We then see cut next day to Jon Stewart's apartment, where we see that Vixen is going to be off doing a modeling job. She mentioned this in her conversation with Shira. She has a modeling shoot that she's coming up doing. John has helped her pack many bags, and they bid adieu with a nice long kiss. And as she goes into the elevator to head down to the driver that's waiting for her, John goes back into the apartment. But just before the elevator doors can close, she notices Shadow Thief move out of the shadows, and she actually busts through the elevator doors and tackles the Shadow Thief through the wall. I don't think John's getting his deposit back. I'm just gonna say that. I think that I'm pretty sure his landlord's gonna be pretty upset with some of the damage that occurs here in this next scene, as we do have a pretty vicious fight that takes place between Vixen, Jon Stewart, Green Lantern, and the Shadow Thief. So we note that the Shadow Thief announces his return, and that Jon Stewart's ring is not going to have any effect on him. We're not quite sure why, but he says he hasn't had any issues with light, as we note that was one of his main vulnerabilities in his first appearance. But he said light really doesn't affect him these days. Vixen does her best to try and overpower him, and John works with her. But ultimately, Shadow Thief puts quite the hurting on Vixen. This enrages John a little bit, but he soon too is overpowered, and he is able to leave with John and takes him hostage. We find out that he's the main person that he's after, not Vixen, as John had assumed. And he announces he's happy enough to announce. Thankfully, he's just an exposition machine here in this episode. He announces that he's after Shira next, and he tells Vixen to stay out of it because he actually refers to her as a Thanagarian harpy. I don't know how they got past the censors to begin with, but they were able to use these euphemisms, but I don't know that they would fly in this day and age. But he's out. He leaves with John, and that leaves Vixen to share the bad news with Shira about the attack on John. And that's where we pick up our next period here, where Vixen and Shira are meeting up, and Vixen has to share the bad news with regards to the return of the Shadow Thief.
Blackest night is brightest day.
John!
Last warning, Sue Candy. This is between me and the Green Lantern and that Thanagarian harpy. Stay out of it.
Shira, he got John.
What? Vixen, what's happened?
The Shadow Thief attacked us. He took John.
That's right. So yeah, Mari radios Shire to let her know what's going on, and so they head they head into the Midway City Museum, looking for Carter Hall, figuring that he might have some sort of lead on where the Shadow Thief could be. And luckily for them, or maybe unluckily, the Shadow Thief is already at the museum waiting for them. He once again makes pretty quick work of taking down Shaira and knocks Vixen out pretty brutally. In fact, drops a giant T-Rex skeleton on top of her inside the museum, which puts Mari out of commission. We'll talk more about that in visuals. Certainly, we get a lot of punching here in the middle, so we can you can zoom through that and get to the good stuff here. But yes, just as Shadow Thief appears to maybe be about to deliver some sort of final blow to Shaira, Hawkman comes swooping in, and we see the two Hawk people go toe to toe with the Shadow Thief. A little bit overwhelmed, but certainly having better luck, perhaps because of their nth metal weaponry and just general warrior prowess. They're sort of seeming to be getting the upper hand briefly, but then Shadowhand sort of backhands Shaira, sends her crashing down to the ground and smashing through several of the displays before tying up Hawkman, and we sort of see it fade to black as he ties him up using his shadowy tentacle things. He's magic. He's a magic guy. He can do anything basically. So we then see Hawkman coming to a little bit later as we see himself, Hawkgirl, Shaira, and John Stewart all sort of kneeling down in these strange clasps, these strange restraints, and it reveals, we see that the holocron from the previous episode, the Thanagarian memory device, which Carter the explorer had touched, which apparently awakened these memories in his head, or as Shaira in a bit of, I guess, hedging, would you call this hedging your bets as to whether or not what we're about to see is the true origin or not, I guess, as Shaira launches in this kind of diatribe about how, well, it's not, it's just a memory log, and it's designed for Thanagarians, and if a human touched it, instead of seeing another person's memories, it might imprint onto you and make you think that it's your own memories when it's really just the memories of whoever owned the ship or whatever.
Of course you recognize the Absorbicron. Despite your best efforts to bury me alive, I managed to retrieve it.
Where's Vixen?
Out of the way. She's not part of this.
That machine is Thanagarian technology. It's a telepathic database, more complex than anything on Earth, and it's broken.
She might be right. When I touched it before, the feedback.
Hush now. Watch and learn.
But Shadow Thief makes it clear that that's not the case, and that he's going to make it clear that all three of these folks have had a part to play and have sort of been intertwined for millennia, as we see him use his shadowy tentacles to grab hold of the wrists of all three of them, John, Shaira, and Carter, and make them touch that holocron. And we then get a big flashback sequence to ancient Egypt as we find out that there were these ancient alien beings. Two Thanagarians landed in ancient Egypt sometime, and known as Qatar Hall and Shai-Era, though spelt a little bit differently. And that despite their best efforts, the people refuse to do anything but see them as gods and demand that they rule over them. And so we see that Qatar and Shai-Era do as good a job as an ancient civilization's ruler can do, I guess, as far as being just. And they're sort of introducing their technology slowly and sort of bettering mankind, as Qatar talks about wanting to protect the whole and sort of teach the whole continent how they can be better, tame this savage continent, he claims. And Shaira notes that while he's been so focused on that continent, and let's be honest, he wouldn't stop with there, he would probably then want to venture out across the seas to other continents, that he has not yet knocked her up. She wants to bear his child. She wants to start a family.
What troubles you, Shaira?
Why ask what you already know? I want to bear
I
your
don't
child,
want to have this
Qatar.
conversation again. Why the hurry? You're a young woman. There's plenty of time.
30 or 40 years at most. I'm not a girl anymore.
You look the same as you did the day I met you. When my work is complete, after I've tamed this savage continent,
You'll set out to conquer the rest of the world.
it's my duty. We owe these people the peace and stability that comes from Thanagarian rule.
I'm not arguing that. But you also have a duty to continue your bloodline. Or are you so tired of me that you don't even
I
want?
love you, Shaira Hall. Nothing will ever change that. It's just that right now, I need to concentrate on...
Hail King Katar! Hail Queen Shaira!
Bashari! No need to stand on ceremony, my friend. What news do you bring?
Victory! The land of Kondak has been freed from Octon's rule and placed under your benevolent protection. As tribute, Teth Adam sends 100 of the finest stallions on Earth.
My husband and I travel on the winds, General. What good are horses to us?
I'll show you.
We hear some trumpets, and we find out that Katar's best friend and one of his closest. We're also, by the way, there's this sniveling little guy named Hathset, who is apparently the Katar's sort of advisor, who clearly doesn't like Shaira and is always giving her the stink eye. And he's clearly a schemer in the background to add to the palace intrigue. But before Katar and Shaira can discuss their lack of baby making any further, the great warrior Bashari returns, who happens to look and sound a lot like Jon Stewart. And he informs him that their latest conquests were a success in a neighboring nation of Kondak, and that Teth Adam has told him that the hierarchy of power in the universe is wrong copy. He says Teth Adam gave them some horses as tribute. And so we see that Shaira kind of blows that off, saying, why would someone that could fly want to ride a horse? Which, fair. But Bashari promises that if they go out horseback riding, perhaps he can show her the fun of it. So we see that Shaira and he have a delightful afternoon of horse riding and maybe some other calisthenic exercises as they get off onto a private island. It's clear that they have a budding attraction with each other. They admit that this is a horrible betrayer of Katar, as he is Bashari's best friend and, of course, Shaira's husband. However, they can't quite seem to resist the temptation, and they give in. And we see them kiss and then dip out of screen. And that weird little guy, Hathset, is hiding in the bushes, looking at it and looking at them. I wonder how long he stayed there and watched, the little pervert.
Yeah,
Regardless, he immediately runs and tattles to Katar that he's seen them together. And of course, Katar doesn't believe him at first.
It can't be true.
No, of course not. Bashari would never betray your friendship in such a manner. And the Queen's trustworthiness is, of course, beyond reproach.
Then why pester me with idle gossip?
It's just that these ugly rumors undermine your authority. And I must admit, no, I speak out of turn.
You speak when I command it, Hathset.
They spend a great deal of time together. They give the appearance of impropriety.
I trust Bashari with my life, and Shaira is my life. I'll hear no more of this nonsense, Hathset. Leave me, now!
As you say, my liege.
But of course, then later on, Hathset sort of arranges for Katar to be overlooking a part of the palace from a balcony up above as he sees Bashari and Shaira together in a very intimate embrace, at which point we see him smash part of the balcony and declaring that he wishes they both were dead. And we cut to later that day. We see, or perhaps a few days later, we hear a maidservant scream and run out of one of the bed chambers in the palace. We see Katar rushing in to find what appears to be a pool of red liquid, and apparently it's coming from the poisoned wine that Bashari and Shaira had just drank, as we see them dead.
Poison.
Just as you wished, my liege.
I didn't. I never meant... Get out.
My liege, I only...
I said, get out!
and we see him sort of cradling her dead body in his arms. And then we see him reach over, grab that poisoned chalice still sitting on the edge of the nightstand, take a sip himself, and we see and we hear the crash of the cup apparently dropping and breaking on the ground. And we cut back to see Katar and Shaira holding hands, both dead on the bed, holding hands in the pose that we saw those mummies back in Shadow of the Hawk. So and as we wake up from our dream sequence / flashback, Shaira says, "Oh, you must be the reincarnation of Hathset, who poisoned us and killed us all." And here's where we get a very, very wacky reveal as to Shadow Thief's real, true identity.
You're Hathset. You're the one who poisoned us. I mean...
No, my queen. I think Hawkman knows who I am. I'm your darkest thoughts, your unspeakable desires. I'm you, Katar Hall. No. When you first touched the Absorbicron, you freed me to do everything you wanted. You wanted the secrets of Thanagarian technology. I found them for you. You wanted to be a hero. I became an arch-villain for you to vanquish. You want this woman? I give her to you. He's the only thing standing between you and the love that spans 8,000 years. End it, Katar Hall. Take what you want.
Boy, howdy doey. So he says that Shadow Thief is the manifestation of the antithesis of his heroic identity, and that's why he was created to be the villain of Hawkman. And also through this weird ritual, he's going to provide Carter with the ability to be the person that ends up with Shaira. So he unchains Hawkman and provides him with an nth metal axe, which he then encourages, very much like the devil on the shoulder, to do what he must to kill John Stewart, thus sealing the deal that he will be the one that ends up with Shaira. And there is a brief moment where it appears that Carter is going to follow through with this deep, dark desire.
Go, Katar. Finish it.
Don't do it, Carter!
Shaira, you're all I've ever wanted.
But you'll never have her. Not while he lives.
Had me worried there.
Weakling, must I do everything for you? My understanding is that this ring of yours requires concentration. You see, even now she runs to him.
Are you all right?
Hurts like crazy, but I'll live. Where's Mari?
Don't know.
I've got to find her. Who knows what that psycho might have...
We'll take care of Shadow Guy. Go.
So, in the process, John's arm is broken by Shadow Thief. He smashes his arm and breaks it completely. So that's pretty grody. Ultimately, it is Carter himself who grabs Shadow Thief by the neck and begins choking him and killing him. And as he's choking out the Shadow Thief reabsorbs within Carter at that point, and then he's choking himself. So Shaira has to interrupt him and make sure that he doesn't kill himself. So he is able to ultimately not choke himself out. So great job not killing yourself, Hawkman. He's reintegrated into Carter's body, and Carter admits at that point, now that Shadow Thief has been defeated, he looks over at Shaira, bids her farewell, and lets him know that he's well aware that he's not meant to be with Shaira at this point.
Shaira, I owe you an apology.
It's not the time, Carter.
No, It never was. We weren't really meant for each other. I have to accept that. And I think we both know how the story is supposed to end.
So he flies off, still a hero, making the right decision. And we see cut back at that point to the Metro Tower, where we see Vixen doing her best to recover. And we see John, who is also all bandaged up and slinged up, comes out of the medical room from where Vixen was to have this conversation with Shayera one-on-one. And this is where he breaks the news to her that he's been to the future, he's seen their future, and the reason why he's been acting so strangely around her is because he knows that their future includes them having a son together named Warhawk.
Shayera, I haven't been fair to Mari, and I haven't been fair to you. I couldn't figure out how to tell you this, or even if I should.
What?
When Batman and I went to the future, we met a man named Warhawk. He's our son, yours and mine.
Our son?
That's why I've been so awkward around you lately. I've been trying to figure out what to do with that knowledge, what it means for our future.
Well, what else could it mean?
I won't be Destiny's puppet. Whatever the future holds, we'll make those choices ourselves.
Don't say you don't love me.
I'll never say that. But you need to know, I'm staying with Mari.
Tell me about my son.
And this leaves Shayera very confused. We then cut to another room where we see Batman sitting at a computer desk, and in walks Shayera, her knowing that Batman was the only other person that went with John into the future, and asks him to tell her about her son. And that's where we cut to black. All right, Liam, let's talk about our thoughts on the plot for this week, shall we? This is a goofy episode. I'm just gonna flat out say it. I think this is a goofy episode. I think ultimately, if we got another 13 episodes, or got some sort of payoff for the triangle square romance square that we have here, I think this may feel a little bit more interesting or pivotal to the story. But because we know there's 2 episodes in this series left, we don't really get to see what happens unless you want to talk about tie-in comics. But even then, we don't really get to see what happens and how they end up back together in this form or fashion. So, or if they end up back together in some form or fashion. So, it feels just kind of like a random detour along this Grodd storyline, or this Luthor and Brainiac storyline that we've kind of been focusing on for the majority of the season. And while it obviously follows up on one of the more interesting parts of the entire Justice League and Justice League Unlimited run, that being the romance between Shayera and John, it is a little bit of a cliffhanger that just kind of goes unresolved. So this episode ends up kind of feeling just like a filler episode that leaves it kind of unsatisfied. It's like, I don't know. It's like eating a bag of chips for a meal. It's like, yeah, you like, there's some good stuff in there, but it's not a meal. You're going to be hungry again pretty soon anyway. And ultimately not as satisfying if you had just got a full course meal out of it. So that's also to say that, I don't know, a quarter or maybe even half of this episode is this flashback, which is interesting, but it's a flashback to involve 3 characters that may or may not be the characters that were directly reincarnated characters that we see on screen. Right. And that's a lot of the runtime of the episode.
Well, that is one thing I would like. I think it's worth, and maybe it's worth positing out to our listeners, one of our action items for the week. Is this a better episode if they just straight up say, yes, it's reincarnation, or no, it's not reincarnation? Like, because they do go out of their way to have Shayera give all this dialogue about, like, well, they imprinted your memory, they imprinted someone else's memory on you because it's a psychic computer that is designed for the much more complicated alien brain, and your simple feeble human mind is confused by it. And it's like it would have been better if they just did a straight up they just did it as a straight up flashback and got rid of like the MacGuffin element of them having to touch this memory computer to have the flashback together.
Right.
I don't know. Like, I think there's that. I think it's compelling. The thing I do like about it is, and I had kind of forgotten the element. I remember that there was an apparent ancestor of Jon Stewart's involved in the flashbacks, but that this version, despite all the comic version, because the comic version is, as we talked about, is the idea that Carter and Shaira, Kendra, whatever her name is currently, they will die and they will be reunited and they will fall in love and then they will be torn apart. And that's sort of the whole gimmick here. And then they go out of their way to be like, no, even in their original lives or whatever, she was meant to be with John, which I think is interesting because that does obviously deviate from the comic Hawk people. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to twist it, to start going into that direction of the convoluted reincarnation that we talked about, it being so silly and confusing at the start, and then going, but even in this, even if this was real, she ended up with John anyway. Like, she was happier with John than she was with Katar anyway, which I think is which is like, I like that bit of it. And I do like, because I think they go out of their way, not necessarily just in this episode but in others, that John really does love Vixen too. Like they don't make her lesser than. Like, I think about, like, I don't know, Ross and Rachel on Friends or something, where it's like whenever one of those characters is dating someone else, like they almost feels like the writers are going out of their way to be like, well, obviously we're going to get back to the real couple eventually. We've just broken them up for the sake of drama, and this placeholder girlfriend or boyfriend of this character will not last past 5 episodes or whatever.
Right.
So, like, I kind of appreciate the idea that at the end, John is like, yeah, I know we might, or there's a version of the future where we end up together, but I truly love Mari and I don't want to throw that away for a what if, or a possible future with you. And I think that's interesting. And like you said, it does make me wish we got another season, because I think it would have been interesting exploring more of how John views both of these women and that kind of thing, because I do think that's probably the most interesting element of it. Because I think all of that stuff's really, really strong and really interesting. To your point, it does kind of end on a cliffhanger note because this is the final season. And then the other thought is, like, the thing that I'm like watching it this time, it's like the idea that, so he touched a computer, an ancient hologram memory computer, and that created a magic shadow man.
That's the
His
thing.
Evil twin magic shadow man came out of him touching this malfunctioning computer. Like, it'd be one thing if it was like a split personality thing,
right?
But it's not. It's like it's somehow him getting electrocuted in his brain created. So it's like there's an element of like just regular old magic to all of this, which is fine, I guess. And I guess if it's reincarnation, there's inherently some magic involved in this. But it's just like, so, but the idea that Shadow Thief came out of like this, it almost felt like it should have been like, I don't know, like the Shadow Thief is like thousands of years old and like was born out of that moment where they die together, and then he's been waiting for them to be reincarnated or something. Like, I don't know, but then maybe that would have definitively named it as reincarnation, which they clearly didn't want to do for whatever reason. So like that's the part of it. That's the part where when the reveal is that he's a magic man, and then Carter defeats him just by like shoving him back inside himself. Brother, that is a wild way to end that character, because he's basically shown to be magic and like almost untouchable throughout the whole fight, and then he's like, and then Carter literally just grabs him around the throat, and then like light starts coming out of Carter, and we see him absorb him back in, and it's like, okay, so Carter just had to want to do that, and that was basically curtains for the Shadow Thief. I don't know.
No, you're not. That was the other thing that it would. I think it would be bad enough, or not bad enough. I think you could fault it enough if it was just the wacky. We're gonna talk about this goofy, somewhat convoluted origin story for these Hawk people, but then we're also going to we're going to allude to the fact that this other like servant person that was the servant um to Hawkman, or to Carter Hall back in Egypt, is also the Shadow Thief. Like, we're doing this red herring thing that like Hathset is the Shadow Thief, and you're made to believe that he is the Shadow Thief. And then when the reveal is that, oh, it's actually not Hathset, it's part of it's Carter Hall's deep dark desires. It just does not have any weight to it. I feel like it doesn't. I think it's supposed to feel like this, like, oh, it's his deep dark desires, and then it doesn't, because there's been almost no setup for this Hawkman character. He has appeared in one episode before, and there was no indication that he was in any way sort of jealous of John. Like, we understand that if this is the same person, that he would have this like inherent jealousy, I guess, but there wasn't even a hint of that when he encountered John at the beginning of the episode. There wasn't any sort of backhanded compliments, or he literally says like, "Hey, what's up? Happy to help out." He's just kind of like this big dumb doofus is just like happy to help. Say hi to Shira for me. Talk to you later. Bye. Like, there's no indication that he has any sort of begrudging feelings against Jon Stewart. If anything, it's the opposite. It's, John doesn't really care for this guy because he's stalking, he feels like he's a stalker to Shira. So would it have been more interesting that he keeps Hawkman bound and he gives John the choice at this point to kill Carter, and try and convince him? You could still have the reveal, that he's whatever, the weird dark desires of Carter Hall or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe just do away with that part and make this John's choice, because it definitely feels like putting it in the hands of John to make the decision at that point of like, hey, I want to be rid of this guy forever. He knows that if this guy continues to get in their way, his future son could be the casualty of any romance that does or doesn't happen. To me, that's much more interesting than what we ultimately get here, because it's just kind of goofy that this is the reveal. Oh, I'm your deep dark secrets. Kill this guy. And you have a second where you're like, wait a minute, why would Hawkman kill this guy? He's not crazy. He isn't bad. He isn't even like borderline bad. He's just kind of like a good guy. So why would he even for a second consider killing Jon Stewart? Even if there is this sort of inherent relationship that he has back to these Hawk people that they're trying to, or that the Shadow Thief is trying to tell him is his story. So I don't know. I just don't think that it had the weight or the gravitas that they were hoping that it would, and it comes off just a little goofy. And as you said, like the way that he's defeated by just being he chokes himself out to the point where he's choking his own body at the end and killing himself, and Shira has to like butt in to make sure that he doesn't kill himself. Very, very odd choice here for that. So yeah, not my favorite episode because of that. I think it ends up looking a little weak, in the overall arc here, because we don't get any follow-up to this. There's no more Shira and John really like plays out on screen. We're kind of left with this idea that she's interested in learning about her son from Batman, and that's the end of that. And just feels kind of unresolved, unfortunately, a casualty of the Cartoon Network deciding they weren't gonna do any more Justice League after these 13 episodes. So Maybe speaking of history, if history was a little different, they got another 13 episodes or something like that, then maybe this would kind of fit seamlessly in there. But as it stands, because there was no follow-up to this, and because of the overall just kind of goofiness to the episode and some of the way that the things were resolved and revealed, I end up with a 4 out of 10 for my plot. What about you?
Yeah, it was a little nicer. I went 6 because I do really like I said, I really like the idea that John and Shaira have this long-term generational connection. And also, like I said, I really, really like the ending of him sort of sticking by his lady with Vixen, and sort of saying, well, just because I sort of witnessed this in this possible future doesn't mean I'm going to let that dictate what I do in the present. And so I like that a lot. And the final scene, which we'll maybe talk about again in voice acting, is very nice of her going to talk to Batman. Is very nice as well. So I liked it a little bit more. I don't, like I said, it would. My thing is, this would be even higher were it not the Shadow Thief was a magic Shadow Man born out of Hawkman's angry feelings because he touched a alien computer. Like that's quite silly, quite frankly. But even for Hawkman origins, it's a little silly. So, but yeah, not the greatest villains at the very least.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our animation and visuals, shall we? As we mentioned at the top here, we have several names, as we did with some of these last Justice League Unlimited episodes here attached to this. So we have a director, Joaquim Dos Santos, returning again. We have the story by Matt Wayne and the teleplay by Jeff Johns. We also have the animation services by DR Movie Co. for this week's episode. Yeah, I think right off the bat, I think one of the things that I mentioned when we were going through our little synopsis was it seems like this was the answer to the haters that complained a lot about Jon Stewart's lack of constructs with his ring for this episode, which he's using a baseball glove at the beginning to try and catch the gentleman ghost. He creates his own tourniquet at one point. I think there's another construct that he uses too that I had written down here. I can't remember what it was. But he uses a couple of different constructs here that you wouldn't otherwise normally see him use. So this felt like a little bit of, we heard you, fans. We're going to do some fun stuff here. It's interesting to me. This is one of those things where I'm surprised it wasn't in the quote unquote production inconsistencies on the DCAU wiki. Baseball, I don't know that based on how old Gentleman Ghost was, how or why he would recognize what a baseball glove is. But he seems to recognize that the baseball glove is a witty contraption that John attempts to use to capture him. He should have just been like, "What is this gigantic mitt-shaped object?" If we were true to form here. But yeah, DCAU wiki writers, get on that. Production inconsistencies right there. Add that to the list there. But yeah, always welcome to see some of those. Also worth mentioning, I like doing this anytime that we get Vixen on the episode. She's great. The manifestation of her powers. We get to see her touch her amulet, and then the animal, whatever powers that she's emulating at that point, do show up here. So we have the ones that I counted, Liam. We have an eel, we have a spider, and we have a bull, and maybe a gorilla also, I think, were all used in this episode. I don't know if I missed any, but cool to see those things. Speaking of visuals involving Vixen, she was the victim of a lot of heavy things being dropped on her in this episode. She gets a bookcase dropped on her, a couch dropped on her, and an entire freaking T-Rex dinosaur.
Mm-hmm. She gets the worst of this fight. Even worse than John and Shair. Yeah, they got away with some. I mean, we can talk about the other physical stuff they got away with in this episode. But yeah, the violence, especially as you mentioned, inflicted on poor Vixen in this episode is great. But yeah, I do agree. The way they visualize her powers is always super cool. The sequence where she is about to get on the elevator to leave John's apartment, and right as the door is closing, she sees the shadow thief slink out of the shadows, and we get this close up of her eye as the doors of the elevator close, and then immediately they get burst open as she comes and runs and tackles him. I was like, that's so cool. Like that's like one of the coolest, I think, shot like hero moments for maybe any character in this season, for her. And yeah, like she definitely gets the worst of it, and then John gets his whole arm broken at the elbow basically by the shadow thief. At the end, he makes a little splint for his arm, which I thought was neat. He's talking about contracts and stuff too. But yeah, a lot of violent acts on poor Mari in this episode. But yeah, they managed to get quite a bit of I thought more sort of over the top violence that I'm used to, and bones breaking and that sort of thing into this episode.
Yeah, there, as you said, the violent breaking of Jon Stewart's arm is something that I had failed to remember was involved in this episode, and took me a little bit by surprise to just the brutalness of it. I mean, there's no bones sticking out or anything like that, but it is very clear that his arm is snapped in the wrong direction. You would not want to see the replay of that one if this was real life. So quite brutal. Yeah, can't believe they got away with that one. I do like, of course, Shadow Thief. His secret origins revealed notwithstanding, he's a cool character. Obviously, the way that his powers manifest with the weird tentacle things, and then him just he's kind of like a stretchy guy, but he's also transparent. Or translucent even. So we get it's almost like Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman had a baby. Not Franklin Richards though, but like they had like this weird child, and then they just dipped him in like tar or something like that. So really cool. He manifests his powers in a couple of really different neat ways. I love the way that he's introduced, just kind of coming out of the shadow of the car in that first sequence, and then that sequence where the elevator doors close and you just see him kind of barely move, or from the POV of Vixen, and then her bursting out of the elevator doors. I liked how that sequence was done. As you mentioned, that fight sequence in John's apartment is really well coordinated there. Again, another nod to Mr. Dos Santos, who seemed to really excel with those fight sequences. He doesn't get a lot of fighting, unfortunately, here, because we have so much of that story kind of taking up the middle portion of the episode, and then it's kind of anticlimactic the way that Shadow Thief is ultimately dealt with at the end of the episode. But ultimately, the little bit of action that we do get in those sequences is paid off pretty well there. Let's see if there's anything else that I had here. In that flashback sequence, some of the things that you do get the insight of. I do like the way the costumes or the uniforms that our Thanagarians are wearing, and how they are more traditionally. They kind of, I feel like they did a good job of marrying that Egyptian style architecture and the way that you would kind of think typical Egyptian clothing and stuff, kind of marrying that into the Thanagarian helmets. I think those look really neat. And there are a couple of those sequences actually that look really good. The stuff with the horses looks good. The shot where Shaira and his name Bathari, I believe, or Bashari, rather.
Yeah.
Bashari are walking, and he throws the sword up to cut the flower down. I thought that was smooth operator. If this is Jon Stewart, regardless, reincarnated, then he certainly got that smoothness passed down to him in that reincarnation as well. Because that sword shot to cut the flower down and catch it and hand it to Shaira was pretty sweet, if I do say so myself. And then in that also, I would say that the sequence where we see Carter Hall witnessing his wife kissing this other man, and they cut down to his hand gripping he's gripping the balcony. You just see it grip tight and like crush the rock. I thought that little sequence is done so well. You feel the intensity and the anger kind of surging through him. And then later on, when you see him discovering, well, first you see the maiden kind of shocked and drop drop whatever she's carrying, the dishes. Carter Hall rushes in. You see what appears to be blood, I guess at first, but it turns out to be the wine spilling on the ground. Him kind of realizing that they've been poisoned, and then the reveal that he's going to drink the same wine to kill himself, and then the cut back to Hathset hearing the crash, him rushing in and seeing the two lovers there holding hands. I really like that. I thought that was done really well. So while the story itself may have been a little bit long in the tooth and maybe not as interesting, since as far as the plot goes, I think that there's a lot of stuff in this episode that looks neat and that looks really interesting. I do like the shot also where you're not sure whether or not Hawkman's going to hit John with the gigantic axe or not, and then he holds it there for a second, then it comes down and breaks John's bonds. The way that quick cut happens, where he swings it down and then it cuts to the bonds, and you see the bonds break. I thought that was done really well. But yeah, I think there is a lot of fun stuff and stuff to appreciate in the animation and the visuals for this episode.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, the flashback sequence is so beautiful. I think the character designs for the ancient versions of Katar and Shaira, the really intricate headdresses that they have, and sort of all of the backgrounds, and so much of it is set at like a twilight time. So you have these like really beautiful like purples and oranges in the skies in the background. When Shaira and Bashari are having their little rendezvous, and I just think that sequence is so great. The fake out with the wine dripping down to look like blood when Katar finds their bodies is incredible. I thought too. That's a really good little fake out there. And then, as you already mentioned, the shot of Hathset sort of solemnly walking out of the room, and then the realization on his face when he hears the glass break is pretty great too. And that cutting back to that shot of them holding the hands, I think is amazing. Also, we've talked about animals hard to animate. I think the sequence where they're riding horses is really, really, really cool as well. So just that whole flashback sequence I think has really, really beautiful animation. Maybe some of the best of the whole episode. But there's a lot of little things I like about the sequence, as well as all the action beats we already talked about throughout. So for all the things maybe we didn't love about the plot, I still gave visuals a perfect 10 out of 10.
Wow, strong score for you. And following suit here, as been the case for our first two episodes here, I'm disagreeing with you just a little bit here. Went 2 points lower, not enough for the disagreement alarm, but 2 points lower. I went with an 8 out of 10. I do think there's a lot of good stuff here. I can see your reasoning for the 10, but I'm going to stick with my score of an 8 out of 10. Either way, I think looking at both of our scores here, this clearly is much stronger than we gave the plot, which is why we make sure we look at the entire episode, not just one aspect of the episode when we're given these scores here, to try and make sure that we're giving an accurate representation of the things that kind of contribute to a good or a bad episode. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category here, which is going to be music. And did you say our dynamic music partners were responsible for this week?
Yeah, I think just Mr. McCuistion and Mr. Carter are credited, but I would assume there's always collaboration between the three. So we'll just say it's the dynamic music partners for this week's music.
There we go. There is some interesting music. I think right off the bat here in our chase sequence between GL and the Gentleman Ghost, I noticed that we have a little bit of organ that's played there, probably to really drive home the fact that we got a little spooky ghost running around in this chase sequence here. I did appreciate that. We do get a lot of the norm for the series, a lot of synth, a lot of synthesized strings and kind of just tone setting that happens here. Specifically, I think with our flashback, we get some really good music that accompanies that makes it feel authentically like we're looking at
like
a
some Ten Commandments style, like
heck yeah, some horns, some stuff that kind of go in there. Although it is synthesized, that's kind of what we're going for with the sound there. Ben-Hur kind of giving you that same feeling of those movies that were set in this era of of the world, specifically in this Egyptian story that we're telling here. There's also some lighter moments, of course, when we're getting the romance angle here. I'm not quite sure if this is the John and Shira theme kind of just reworked a little bit, but you definitely get some of a romantic flourish to it when our Shira and and
yeah.
and Bashari are interacting here, and then the rage kind of as we mentioned that when Carter Hall recognizes and realizes that his wife has betrayed him, the music really swells when they cut to that shot of the hand crushing the overlook there. That music really swells and gives you the feeling of the anger of this character that's kind of flowing through him. And then that's sort of replaced by some of the tragic sounds as we kind of, we have this culmination of this Carter Hall drinking the poison himself there, and the sort of the tragedy kind of resolves there at the end there. Those were the main highlights that I had for music there, other than some of the fight sequences, of course. What else? Anything stick out to you besides those?
Yeah, I mean, along the lines of what we talked about, we do get some of the character themes. You already mentioned the Shire and John theme. I don't know if we mentioned this in visuals, but there is a definite parallel to when Shire is removing her headdress to the final scene from Wild Cards, where John and Shire kiss for the first time in that episode, of where they remove her mask sort of very slowly and dramatically, and the love theme kind of comes in, and I think they kind of reprise that here when she removes her mask here, so that felt very, very purposeful. And yeah, there is kind of a Hawkman theme when he gets his big heroic moments, which I liked. And then maybe my favorite bit, you kind of touched on it, like the Ben-Hur Lawrence of Arabia type score, when Bashari first shows up on his chariot. It's the Michael McChristian Green Lantern theme, but played in that very epic orchestra, old time, Arabian Nights type of way. And I was like, that's so cool. Like we've talked about that for years, the Justice League theme played in the old West way or something like that in some of the other episodes. The taking that existing piece of music that we know and that we've heard 100 times and interpreting it in a new way is such a cool trick that our dynamic music partners were so good at pulling out. And I really got a kick out of hearing the GL theme in that sort of Ten Commandments way. I thought that was a great gag as well. And then definitely it felt like the John and Shira theme comes in, but very somberly at the end when he kind of makes his decision to not get back with Shira, at least not right now. It kind of comes in again, but in a much more somber way. So yeah, I thought the music was really tremendous this week.
Yeah, it's really strong. There's some really great stuff here that plays out, and obviously, with the array of emotions that we have here, a lot of it more on the softer side, and well, not necessarily the softer side, I guess, but there are some softer moments mixed in with, this feeling of betrayal. The Hawkman theme when he first shows up in the first scene, I really enjoyed that. Also, made me wish that we got more Hawkman on this show, so we could hear some more of that theme. But yeah, overall, I thought that the music was very strong for the episode. I ended up going with a 9 out of 10 for my music. I think, as you mentioned, everything that kind of the fact that they got to play in the sandbox of a different era of time, a different century, a different millennia, even, and kind of play with the traditional Hollywood music themes that kind of go with that, but also use some of our heroic themes in the midst of that, is a lot of fun, and really shows the depth of talent of our dynamic music partners that we've come to know and love.
Absolutely, and that's been the theme, as you said, this week and this year so far. I was just a little bit higher on my score as I gave it another perfect 10 out of 10.
Alrighty, 2 perfect scores from you thus far. We'll see where we do when it comes to our voice acting, which is our next and final category of the day. Not a ton of voice actors to talk about this week, a small but mighty cast. And of course, we have some of our voice actors playing multiple roles, since we have multiple versions of the same character, question mark, perhaps. But yeah, let's go ahead and discuss our voice actors and actresses from this week, Liam.
Yeah, not a huge cast to talk about, as you mentioned, but a few definitely notable names. We do briefly have Robin Atkin Downes as the gentleman ghost who pops up from time to time. He's one of the Watchtower employees, I think, in another episode, and has had a few other. He actually has a role in. He steps in to voice Rhino briefly in Batman and Harley Quinn, which we have not gotten to yet, and even I believe played the Gentleman Ghost again in one of the Lego video games later. So
there you go.
Fun to have him here. As we talked about, that's just kind of he's one of the few villains I would say that people might recognize as a Hawkman villain. So throwing him in there just felt like a fun little nod to some of that character's history. But yeah, it's fun to have him there. And then we have returning to the world of the DCAU, although in a different role, we have Hector Elizondo, who has actually been around quite a few times, but in Bruce Timm's least favorite episode, The Terrible Trio, as well as, of course, playing Krager, the right-hand man of Hrotalik in Starcrossed, and then, of course, he comes back in the Hunter's Moon episode, and even actually voiced Bane in a couple of projects, including the Batman Rise of Sinsu video game and Mystery of the Batwoman. As the man, as far as I know, the only man on any kind of movie or TV show to ever say the words "Bon voyage, Senor Batman" to date so far.
Right.
We'll have to see if that changes. But yes, him. It's fun. And this is more of a plot note again. It's like they set up him to be this red herring that the Shadow Thief is going to turn out to be this guy who is kind of the reincarnation of this other right-hand man who hated Shayera on Thanagar, or is going to be the reincarnation of Hathset, this advisor of Katar, and kind of mingling. This guy is like a long time enemy of Shayera, so he's there to just kind of be a red herring, but it's nice to hear his voice again, and I guess it's fun. It's not his fault that the red herring only lasts for like 5 seconds, because as soon as they come out of the flashback, he's like, no, I'm not him, I'm somebody else. Like that, but that's not his fault. So I think he does it's fun to have him back, and that's a fun little wink and a nod if you're paying attention to throw you off the scent, I guess.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Not a ton, obviously, to go off of once he reveals that he is in fact Carter Hall. But interesting, yeah, that they went through the. Again, it just adds to the. I'm not quite sure what you were going for here. Obviously, them drawing the parallel to the other Hawkman, not Hawkman, right hand man is interesting, but ultimately the casting him in this role that ultimately is not the same person is it I guess it feeds into that convoluted Hawkman history, right? Because the DCAU has its own convoluted Hawkman history with the introduction of Hrotalik. So yeah, I guess they're playing a little bit into that. I don't know. But yeah, he does a fine job. He sounds like an evil, scary, creepy evil shadow guy, and I never know where to put this in, but I thought it was very interesting, and I was hoping they would kind of use it again. But when they first when they first introduce Shadow Thief to this episode, where he pops up out of that parking lot. He does have the creepy exhaling rasp of a pervert that you once attributed to Clancy Brown's The Batman Mr. Freeze. He goes like that, and I was like, "Is this like the official Stinger sound effect for the creepy Shadow Thief?"
Man.
Unfortunately, I don't think it returned after this, but yeah, that was interesting. It's the first thing that you hear when this character shows up on screen. So very interesting. I figured I'd insert that there, but yeah, a fine job.
That's yeah, and then we'll talk about briefly. We do have Gina Torres as Vixen. Again, it's not really her episode, but I like again just the very like domestic side of John and hers relationship, and they are very sweet together. We'll talk about Philomar more in a moment, but I do really like I said, I like her and Mr. Lamar playing off each other. And as we said, if we have the biggest critique, might be that we just didn't get to see more of this relationship in another season, which obviously isn't Miss Torres' fault, but she does a good solid job.
Yeah, I think she's great. I love that she exudes this confidence. Like I said at the beginning when we were doing the recap, she's clearly very confident in who she is. She understands that Shaira also is attracted to and has this history with John. But she's confident in who she is. She's confident in how she looks and what her profession is. She's a model / superhero on top of it. So, and she's got her man, and she's not afraid of a little competition there. So I love the little bit of hesitancy that she gives when Shire tosses the water bottle after mentioning that she if they were on Thanagar, she would have just poisoned her water bottle. So it's a funny little bit. And the fact that she does have to work with Shire here is interesting. So yeah, if anything, it is a little bit sad that we don't get more of the three of them interacting on more episodes. But that's not her fault. So yeah, a fine job for her though.
Absolutely. And then we have James Remar pulling, I guess, technically triple duty because he is voicing, of course, he's voicing Hawkman, Carter Hall. He's voicing the flashback Katar Hall. And then he is also, of course, voicing Shadow Thief. I think maybe they maybe mixed in Mr. Elizondo's voice a little bit to the Shadow Thief's voice, as we kind of talked about, because obviously Mr. Elizondo is playing Hathset completely in the flashback, but there are certain words or effects where it feels like there's more of his voice in there in the first part of the episode, again maybe to throw you off the scent a little bit. But yeah, certainly by the end when he's ranting and raving about how he's become the ultimate villain, he's helping Carter fulfill his destiny by being the villain to his hero, and now you can strike down, he's playing the Emperor to Carter's Luke Skywalker. Very, a versatile performance from Mr. Remar, playing technically three separate characters. But as we already, I think we already talked about his best moment, and I think it's funny because I think some of the DVD special features had a moment where I think the late Dwayne McDuffie talked about how incredible it was to be in the recording booth for this moment. But that moment where he shouts at Hathset to get out of the room in the flashback when he sees what's happened to his beloved, and he just, this big booming voice comes out of him as he shouts "get out," is like it's really moving. And I think maybe his best off is as the flashback as Katar, more than as Shadow Thief, the raspy pervert, or Hawkman himself. I think maybe his best stuff comes in those flashback, again, just those the scene between him and Shair where he's promising that they'll have a family one day, and then the deep sort of rage that he feels when he sees her and Bashari together, and then that moment at the end when he yells at Hathset to get out. I think he does some really good work and really gets to flex those pipes. A lot of shouting and yelling for him to do this week.
Yeah, he's got a lot of emotion to show, a lot of it very angry, obviously, which is an interesting juxtaposition because we see him, as I said at the beginning, he would be like the dumb jock character. I feel like in a traditional movie, like he's just kind of like hey, what's up? Happy to help out. Hey, this is an nth metal axe.
Right.
Like he's just giving like, hey, what's up, John? Good to see you. Like he thinks he's friends with John, but John is not friends with him, clearly. Like that's kind of the role
He,
that he shows
yeah,
there.
he almost plays it like, I don't think that's necessarily what they were going for, but that, yeah, he has like a little bit of like, he doesn't understand social cues. Like,
Right.
he doesn't understand why John wouldn't want to hang out with them. Like,
Right, precisely. Yeah, it's so yeah, I think that juxtaposed to this very obviously more serious, he's a leader, he's the ruler of this land. He's very much obviously in love with his wife, and the sort of dissension into almost madness, if you will, that occurs across this little flashback that we see here, where he's very confident, and then we literally see, biblically, it's like the snake in the garden. We see Hathset come up and start dropping these little tidbits in and trying to like weave his way in and influence him, but he's trying to pretend like he's all innocent in the way that he's influencing the king. And then as we said, when he finally sees the betrayal and the rage that happens because of that, and the response that he has to Hathset, and then ultimately his regret. By the way, kids, if you're listening, be careful of the things you say out loud when you say things like, I don't know, I wish he was dead, or I wish he was dead. You never know when a servant might be standing by and being willing to do your dirty work for you. So yeah, be careful in saying that, because boy does he regret that. His wish came true in this instance. But yeah, the sorrow and obviously the sadness when he comes to the realization that his wife is passed is also, he's very subdued. He's very, very deeply saddened. And then ultimately, I think when we're back with Hawkman, and he has to have this conversation with Shire where he recognizes that he's not meant to be with her, and that he's perfectly content with just kind of being Hawkman, and her being Shira, and that's it. Like they're just friends. That's it. And this there's a little bit of sadness, I feel like, in him in coming to this realization, or in deciding to let her go. But I love that it very much mirrors that same release that John ultimately does, and we see in the conversation later with him, where he's not gonna, just because they were something in the past, he's not gonna let the past dictate his actions going forward and make him an obsessed individual that's obsessed about this relationship, right? He's just kind of gonna let the chips fall where they may, and at this point he recognizes that Shira does not feel the same way about him, and he's not gonna try and force her hand. So that there is a little bit of sorrow, obviously, in that letting her go there at the end of this interaction there, but there's some good emotion that Mr. Remar has to evoke across this entire episode, and I think he does a fantastic job.
absolutely, totally agree. And he's got a couple of great partners. Our only two regular leaguers, at least ones that get speaking lines, or at least original seven leaguers this week. We have, of course, Phil Lamar as both John Stewart and Bashari. I do like that his Bashari does have like the slightest bit of like, I guess, like an African accent to his performance. Like, it's not quite just the regular John Stewart voice, and he's also just a bit more sort of boisterous and a little less reserved than John is as well. So I like that there's a little bit of a difference, even though it is supposed to be like, the, or at least the idea is that he's playing the reincarnation of John Stewart. So it's pretty close to the John Stewart voice, but there is those little tweaks with I feel like the little bit of an accent and just being a little bit more braggadocious and more fun loving perhaps in those sequences. But yeah, I think he does. Mr. Lamar, what else can be said? It's he's got great stuff, as we mentioned, with Gina Torres' Vixen. His sort of selling of, I think, of the rage when Shadow Thief knocks Vixen through a wall at one point, or drops the couch on her, and he just goes, "You bought a world of it, Shadow Thief." And he's got like so much pent up rage at that moment as he's trying to unleash it. I think he's really good. And in that final scene, as we said, when he declares that he will not be Destiny's puppet, that's such a like dramatic and over the top line, and I think that would have come off very hokey or very silly with a lot of actors. And so as is the case often, Mr. Lamar probably elevating the material a little bit as he kind of gives that final speech and informs Shire that he's staying with Vixen. I think he's this is a really strong outing from him, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, he's great. He has a lot of emotion himself to show here. A lot of it rage, a lot of it anger, a lot of it frustration. Obviously, here in the GL moments, and there's some downbeats also, of course, when he's having the conversations with Vixen at the beginning, kind of doing their planning. I like that when you see them in the apartment at the beginning also, or in the condo at the beginning also. I love getting this kind of look into their lives, and they're clearly very much in love. They feel each other. They know each other extremely well. He's got the English muffin prepared for her. It just feels like you're kind of looking in on a couple that gets each other, that fits like peanut butter and jelly, so to speak, you know? So I love that we see the chemistry that they have there. And then the downbeat at the end where we get this, you know, John is absolutely stalwart and deciding like, hey, I'm not letting this, I'm no longer letting this thing that I know control me and allow me, you know, to try and dance around my current feelings. He loves Shaira, he admits that, but he clearly has romantic feelings for and quite possibly loves Vixen as well. That's the woman he's with. He still obviously is pretty close to this betrayal that Shaira had for him. So he's sticking with Vixen for now, and I like that he's willing to kind of stick to his gun, so to speak, here. And there's some great performance in that Mr. Lamar does, some nuance a little bit there. And then that's not even talking about his part as Bashari, and as you mentioned, a little bit of an accent that he gets, and some of the romance that we get there, the fun-loving kind of light-hearted nature that character ultimately has for the majority of his screen time. So yeah, unsurprisingly, I don't know how many times we'll say it, but we'll say it every time we get the opportunity. Mr. Lamar, uh, really great at what he does.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have Maria Canales Pereira playing Shaira slash Shai Art Shai. Well, it's still pronounced Shaira, but it's spelled differently. And apparently, also is the voice of the screaming maidservant who finds her own dead body later. But yes, again, very strong. Her best stuff is probably in again, maybe in the flashback sequence. She does have the unfortunate task of trying to have to spew out all of the gobbledygook about the alternate explanation for what's happening and how they're all seeing these apparent memories and how it's not actually reincarnation. But I do think she plays it pretty well. And then, man, the final line of this episode, her walking up to Batman and saying, "Tell me about my son." And there's so much vulnerability in it. In a weird way, it's like this. Maybe it's not the perfect scene to compare it to, but there's a vulnerability in her voice there that really reminds me of the end of Paging the Crime Doctor.
Absolutely.
When Bruce asks Matthew Thorne to tell him about his father, and it's this beautiful moment of, you know, this very, you know, grim and stern character, you know, sort of tapping into this childlike moment. And it's almost the reverse with Shire being so, you know, sort of stern and serious and sarcastic at times. It's just this really beautiful moment of vulnerability in her voice when she asks Batman for that, you know, for that gift to learn about this son of hers that she didn't know she was going to have or might still have in the future. And man, that line alone really is like worth the price of admission for Miss Canales this week.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah. I mean, you could probably say the same things that we've said about our other voice actors and actresses, you know, that did double duty or triple duty in some cases of playing multiple characters, albeit the same character, maybe just in different times. But yeah, I think she's great. I think the conversations that she has between when she's Shaira with Vixen, I think those are fun. Like the budding rivalry between the two of them kind of both feeling comfortable enough to be open and talking about them vying for the same man's affection is great. I love the little back and forth that they have in their conversation there. When she's this ancient version of Shaira, kind of you get the initial kind of like sadness and unsettled feeling that she has of longing to have a family and to have a child, and then the vulnerability that she gets in the somewhat the fear that she has, and like, can she betray her husband for for the love of this other man that she has, and sort of the internal fight that she has on whether or not she should do this comes out in the delivery there, and then ultimately the conversation that she has with John at the end. Again, just another great scene between these two great voice actors and actresses. In this vulnerability that they have, her coming to the realization that she's having a child and almost getting upset with John that he's like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean? We're going to be together. We're going to have this child. And John's like, yeah, not today. Sorry. And her kind of coming to the grips with that and feeling like she's even more confused now that she's had this bomb dropped on her, and the fact that she goes to Batman, that the person that she feels like is the only other person that she can go to with this question, obviously, who had the interaction with Warhawk. The vulnerability that she has, spot on with the Paging the Crime Doctor parallel there. I think that there's some good vulnerability in her performance there, and pretty outstanding as far as all the performances go for the voice actors and actresses this week, which is why I felt like I had no choice but to give the voice actors and actresses a 10 out of 10. What about you?
Nice. Yeah, we are in full agreement on that one, as I also gave it a 10 out of 10. My third perfect score of the episode, if I'm keeping track, which I am.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, you are here. So, very interesting. I think we're going to come up with some very different scores here in just a second. I think we will go ahead and total up those scores. And totaling up my scores for the day, Liam, I end up with a 31 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and maybe the most surprising first entry of 2026 into our top pick section that I could have imagined. Yeah, my final score with off the backs of my perfect scores in visuals, music, and voice acting, I gave this a 36 out of 40.
That I'm gonna have to look back and see. Has there ever been an episode that made it into the top picks where it only got in because of three perfect scores, like three category? Like, that's the only way that you can scrape by, essentially, is like, with something that's just slightly above average, and then the rest of it just blows you away, which is interesting again, because we talked about there's not a lot of action in this episode. So the animation and visuals aspect had to kind of work together with that. Obviously, our music and our voice acting were both strong from both of us. But yeah, very interesting there. So this leads us to a very interesting question then, and that is rewatchability. And where do you land on that? I think the conversation has to be had, because this is a Hawk Lantern ship episode, really the finale to our Hawk Lantern storyline, albeit a one that's left dangling. Kind of feels important.
Yeah, I think this is. I mean, it's the sequel to the first Hawkman and Hawkgirl episode, anyway. And then the fact that it is our sort of like you said, maybe it's a bit of a cliffhanger or a bittersweet way to end it. But it's this is sort of where we leave John and Shire, at least in this time frame. As you mentioned, there are some tie-in comics, the Justice League Infinity book that came out in the earlier 2020s, maybe delved a little further into the John, Vixen, and Hawkgirl love triangle. But yeah, as far as on-screen adventures, this is it. So it does feel like this is, for lack of a better term, the period. We can assume, we can infer that because Batman Beyond still happens, as far as we know, that Warhawk is born, and at some point John and Shire get back together. But I think it is interesting to kind of leave that up to the imagination, to not close that loop within this series, even as we said, kind of as they got into these later seasons, they at least sort of prepared for the possibility that they weren't coming back for another season. So I do find it quite fascinating that they kind of went that road to be a bit more melancholy with the ending, and sort of have Shaira and John both cursed with this sort of knowledge of what their union could bring, but ultimately, for now at least, choosing not to be together anyway is really fascinating. So yeah, I think this is a borderline must watch for maybe it's a two thumbs up.
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to disagree with you on that. You know, even though I did not like the plot itself, and there are goofy aspects to it, and it is unfortunately a result of the show not getting picked up for more episodes. Yeah, it is very important to have this moment take place on screen, and the Hawk Lantern romance, as we said, threads all the way back to the original series, Justice League. So, yeah, kind of important. I dare say, a mandatory rewatch here as far as that's concerned. And speaking, by the way, if you want to hear our coverage of those Justice League comic book tie-in comic books, you can check out the archives at dcaureview.com or on your favorite podcast app. We reviewed that entire run of comics.
We were reviewing that book and another DCAU comic book and doing weekly reviews all at the same time. So if we sound like we're going slowly insane as you listen back to those episodes, we were.
It's a lot of podcasting. We were doing a lot for I don't know why.
Heavy is the head.
That's right, exactly. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode as well. Do you think it's a mandatory rewatch? Do you like the history of these characters potentially being reincarnated lovers and or reincarnated love triangle? Please hit us up on our socials at DCAU Review. Twitter X is our main source of contact. Of course, you can also use Instagram. We post on there a lot too. Slide into the DMs, comment on the posts, however you want to get that information to us. You can also comment on the episode itself. If you're listening on Spotify, we're getting more comments per week on our Spotify episodes. That helps us out multiple different ways. I imagine that probably feeds that old algorithm monster a little bit. When old Spotify sees that people are interested in talking about our episodes, that helps out a lot. So comment on the episode if you're not on social media or you don't want to. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also, of course, leave a review while you're there. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify. It's simple. It's in the app. Just click on the podcast, leave a review, 5 stars. Same with Apple Podcast. If you're listening there, leave a 5-star review. If you leave a little blurb and you say something nice about us and it's 5 stars and you live in the US, a lot of qualifications, we will send you a thank you gift for taking the time to do so. And then, of course, if you are not listening on either of those two apps, we invite you to listen to us on YouTube. Even if you are listening to us on those apps, check out our YouTube channel, search DCAU Review, or check out the show notes. If you would like to, please subscribe to us on that YouTube channel. More and more listeners happening through YouTube as people move away from those traditional streaming apps and just kind of want to do everything in one place. So head on over to YouTube, check out our YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like the videos, all the things that the creators on YouTube tell you to do. Hit the bell, all that stuff. Liam, we, of course, also have more ways to support the podcast. You can pick yourself up a piece of merchandise, head over to our store. That's linked in the show notes. Or you can become, as we mentioned at the top of the program, you can become a supporter of the podcast, a one-time supporter or monthly supporter at any of our 3 tiers, including the Super Friend tier, which comes with the perk to ask us a question. This week, one of our supporters, Zach, got his question in, and you have the question, I believe.
I sure do. So his question for this episode is, how do you think Batman answered Shire's request? And Zach goes on to add that his feeling is that perhaps Batman turned her away or said that it wasn't her place to tell her any more about it. And wondering our thoughts on that. Great question, Zach, because I had honestly not thought about that. As much as we just talked about how poignant and beautiful that ending scene is. Like what Batman would have said back to her that is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a line here and there, I think, in the Once and Future thing where he tells John not to look too far into your future or something like that. I think there's even a moment in the Static Shock Batman Beyond episode where Static tries to tell him about what's been going on in the future, and Batman says, don't let me know, I don't want to know, or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So there is that moment of this, but would he make that decision for someone else as well, is I think a fair question to ask, because he is obviously much more active in the first Hawkman episode, and he's sort of almost taunting both Shayera and Green Lantern about the idea of destiny, and if you really believe that you're destined to be with this person or that person, why aren't you with them? Like,
right.
So yeah, that's a really interesting question. I had not thought about that. But yeah, I think maybe he would be resistant to tell Shayera too much about it for fear of either meddling in John's love life or for potentially destroying the space-time continuum. I think he would claim it's because he doesn't want to like rupture the space-time continuum by telling her about the future, but really it's because he doesn't want it's messy, and he doesn't want his friends to be mad at him. I think that's the actual reason he would turn her away.
Well, I would say the only thing that we know about Batman, if we don't know anything about him, we know that he is compassionate, and we know that he has a heart for people. And I think that he probably would have found a way to both protect the future, because I do think that those lines in Once and Future Thing are important. You don't want to know too much about your own future self. I think even maybe in the, I don't remember if there's a line like that in the Static Future Shock episode or not, but there's something there. I don't know. The old Bruce Wayne talks about the past and the future and all that stuff there as well. So I think there is. So I think there's credence to that. I think that there's enough there to say that he's not just going to be like, well, he's a guy in a suit and he's wearing a helmet, and like, he's going to give the full recap of everything. But I do think that he's compassionate enough to kind of get to the heart for what her concern is, right? Her concern ultimately is this relationship with John going to work out? Is she, how do they get together? What is ultimately why does she want to know about her son in full here? Like, what does she want to know about him? Is he kind? Is he, is he a warrior? Is he strong? What is it that she wants to know about him? And I think he would be willing to give enough information there where that doesn't necessarily influence, or contradict, I should say, his stance on knowing too much about the future. So I think he would stick to some of that, but I do think that he would show compassion to her and show kindness enough to her, because, like we said, we've seen in Paging the Crime Doctor, we've seen somebody, again, it's not a future potential paradox thing that would be caused by him knowing about his dad, so it's a little bit different, but we've seen Bruce on the receiving end of someone being willing to take the time and being kind and compassionate enough to share in those moments where you're just trying to have this connection with somebody. You're trying to regulate your feelings in the midst of this realization. So yeah, I think Batman would show compassion in that, but still stick to that framework of not revealing too much about the future. Great question, Zach. Man, just when I think Zach is like asked the best question, he comes up like the next week he comes back with another one. So if you'd like to join Zach and the growing list of supporters of the podcast, head over to buymeacoffee.com/DCAU review. Join that top tier list of super friends so that you can get your question in and answered as well. All right, Liam, so that will wrap us up for today. We will continue next week with more reviews. However, with only 2 episodes left in Justice League Unlimited, we will be stepping away from JLU for the time being and instead venturing off into the Elseworlds with a review next week. However, it somewhat ties in to one of the characters featured on this week's episode, or maybe 2 of them.
That's right. So we're going to head back to the world of the Batman, the early 2000s beloved, though sometimes perhaps forgotten, animated series, and talk about the 5th season episode, What Goes Up, which featured, like many of episodes of that final season did, features the Batman teaming up with one of his new Justice League cohorts, and it happens to be Hawkman, and as they tangle with both Black Mask and the Shadow Thief, but a different version. So a lot to get into next week when we talk about what goes up in the Batman.
Looking forward to that one. Been quite a long time since I've seen that episode. Probably 20 plus years since I've seen that episode. So interested to look back on that one and check out that world's version of Hawkman next week with you. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you all in the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.